We're back out on the bass buggy, and today we're talking about how it seems like you're out on the water for hours and hours and never getting a single bite. Let's see if we can fix that. Stick around. Remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video on your social media. I can't say thank you enough.
Nice.
Yep. Oops. All right. Oops. I got myself now. And I got myself again. Yay. All right. Got the 2-pounder. 1.5, probably about 1.5. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing, and today we're talking about those days in the water that seems like no matter what you do, you just can't buy a bite. For some anglers, that's all too often a reality. So today, we're going to look at some of the reasons why that is, and what you can do about it. Now first off, our first inclination is to blame the fish. The fish are suspending, the fish are cruising, the fish just aren't biting. And while that might be true to some extent, there's always something you can do to eke out at least a few bites, even on the harshest days with the brightest bluebird sky and still calm conditions. Now, believe it or not, it all boils down to just two things. Number one, the fish just aren't liking what you're throwing. For whatever reason, your presentation is not something the fish are interested in. Either it's the wrong bait altogether, or there's something about the way you're retrieving it that the fish just aren't excited about. And number two, the fish just aren't there. There's no fish in the area. Everything boils down to those two reasons. It might seem like it's a simplification, but it's really the truth. So we're going to pick those two things apart and see what we can do about it. All right. 2 pounds. Nice. On the, boy, that tail is messed up. This fish has been caught before. There's a hole in it. Now, first up, locating fish. It doesn't matter what bait you're throwing. If there's not any fish there, you're not going to catch anything. So what can we do about that? Well, this takes a little bit of experience to find those high percentage areas. And a lot of times it's just practice getting out on the water. But with experience, you learn to pick out those high percentage areas. However, even then, the difference can be extreme for a bank angler and an angler on a boat. For an angler on a boat, you have access to more water. You can just put the big motor down, fire it up, and go elsewhere. For a bank angler, places you can fish are extremely limited, especially on some bodies of water. You can see here, this is my home lake, and it only affords 2 or 3 realistic locations for bank fishing. And these locations are not great. Chances are there's no fish in these areas. So what I like to do is I get on good old Google Earth and I scour my area. And I look for new bodies of water to fish. And I've actually found quite a few. One in particular makes a regular appearance on this channel. It's a small public lake that I found out in the middle of the woods using Google Earth. Funnily enough, it's actually a state-run facility, so it's pretty well maintained and taken care of. And regular viewers to this channel will recognize it. So get Google Earth and start taking a look. Chances are high you can find alternative places to fish without much effort. Now, some of these lakes are going to be private fisheries, But you can check online, usually with a follow-up search that can be quite revealing, and you can discover bodies of water that you never even knew existed and give yourself much greater varieties to catch fish from the bank. Now, once you're on these fisheries, whether it's your old one or finding something new, you're going to have to learn how to recognize high percentage areas. That is paramount to locating bass. A lot of it has to do with recognizing bass patterns and bass behaviors. You may get out there and junk fish and maybe luck on some fish here and there. But if you want to consistently catch fish, you are going to have to learn how to identify high percentage areas. And it's really not that hard. And with a little bit of practice, you'll be doing it like a pro. Now the next thing is, if you've located fish and you're throwing baits, but you're not getting any bites. In those instances, more than likely, the bass are just not interested in what you're throwing. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. However, with effort, most times I can eke out a bite here or there, even on the toughest day. Now I classify all baits into 4 different types. And it's really a simple system. And I use these baits depending on what I'm trying to achieve. Now, first up is your finesse style presentations. Now that, of course, would include something like a Senko on a wacky rig or a Texas rig. This is a great presentation for finesse. Also, you have bigger plastic worms, something that might have a little bit more flap. This is a worm that I make myself, and I use it on a Texas rig as well as on a shaky head, and it does great for me. Sometimes I'll even put it on a drop shot. And another finesse style presentation that we all know and love, of course, is the jig. This is an actual Arky jig with a chunk trailer on the back, and these are absolute money. Now, when do I use these presentations? Whenever my search area is very small and limited. I found a very high percentage area. I'm looking at an isolated brush pile, or I'm looking at a dock, or I see a thick laydown that's along the banks and it sticks out by itself. I'll pull out something like this and I'll work that area very slowly. I'm not trying to draw bass from a distance. I'm pretty sure that they're there already. I'm just trying to basically put this right in front of their face and draw that reaction strike if I can. These types of baits excel at those reaction strikes. If you know an area is holding fish, such as under a dock, an isolated grass pile, under flooded brush, or a laydown, these are great ways to try to coax those fish into biting. You're not going to cover a lot of water with them, but you generally don't have to. These work great if I'm pretty positive the area's got fish in it. Next up, we have baits that I work just a bit faster. They're not finesse baits, but they're not actually technically crankbaits either. And that would be something like this jerkbait or this Zara spook. I'm working these faster on the water, but it's not a steady retrieve. These have a wider search area of use than a finesse bait is. If I'm in an area that I feel is a high percentage area, I know that there's fish somewhere in there, I can throw these and work that water pretty thoroughly. It expands the area of water that I can work, although these are technically still not true search baits as I would call them. If you have the luxury of being on a boat that has electronics on it, such as down imaging or side imaging, and you can see those bait balls, jerkbaits are great for that. If you work these around and through those bait balls, chances are you can get you a few bass. A Zara spook is a topwater bait, obviously, and it's got a similar type of mentality, whereas you're walking it along the top of the surface, usually in shallow or slick, calm water. But these can cover a lot of water too, and you can use these similarly to a search bait if you know there's a high percentage area and you know that there's probably bass in there. Next up, we're expanding the area of water that we're working just a bit more, and these are true straight retrieve baits, such as this spinner bait or this swim jig. And in the right situations, whenever you're searching water, these are great tools to have. I will use this if I'm seeing a whole line of laydowns and wooden brush along the bank. If I'm in the bass buggy, I will aim towards the laydowns and bring this to me. Or I can turn the bass buggy parallel to the boat and work this along the edge of those laydowns. And this is great for pulling those bass up and out of their hiding areas. Unlike a finesse bait that you're trying to basically bonk them on the head with it and get that reaction bite, this is something that you can use to attract them from a distance This will attract them from a distance too. However, the way that I like to use a swim jig is, if I know that there's fish in the area, especially something like a bait ball that I'm seeing on my electronics, I will throw past that and then try to bring it through the strike zone and try to entice those fish to follow it in and give me a strike. Using these baits in those type of situations have been extremely effective for me. And last up, we have what you would call the true search baits. These are the hard cranking baits. These are the ones that you'll burn really quickly for a few cranks and then let pause. You are trying to cover as much water as quickly as you possibly can. And something like this OG Slim 6 or this KVD 2.5 are great search baits. Now, if you have a bank that's got a 45-degree slope coming off of the bank towards the boat that gets pretty deep pretty quick, that is where I find that a square bill crank does great work. I can really dig that bill in and it can work it through and around that structure very well, and it entices a lot of bites. Now, in deeper areas such as offshore, I'm going to be using this. This is more of your traditional deep diving crankbait. I can get this down about 10 to 12 feet, especially on light line. I can work this through those deep stumps or those deep rock piles and work it through there, and I can bounce this bill off of whatever structure is down there and let it float back a little bit and really entice those bites. These are both great options for covering water quickly. These are what you would call a true search bait. Now, if you're a bank angler, chances are you're not going to be able to throw a square bill or a deep diving crank from where you're at. But a lipless can get the job done just as good. You can work these from deep to you in much the same fashion. You crank it and then you stop. You crank it and then you stop. These are for covering water quickly. If you know you're in the right area but you don't specifically know where the bass are at, these make excellent search baits. And you can rarely go wrong by using a lipless crank from the bank trying to search water. So there you go. Catching fish literally is as simple as finding the right water and throwing the right bait. With a little bit of practice and a healthy dose of patience, we can get better at these things. Hopefully, these tips and tricks will point you in the right direction. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.